Uh, My name is John Shepard. I'm the chair of the Board of Zoning Appeals. I welcome everyone here. Just with a little more housekeeping, as we were talking before, we're going to do the variance first and then the appeal that concerns North Point and Pritchett Lane. And before we start that, the hearing for Pritchett Lane, we'll have another chance to let other people sign up for the public hearing. You haven't lost your chance to speak for that as we move ahead with the variance. The variance is probably going to take anywhere from half an hour to an hour. I'm just guessing, but just to give you an idea of what to expect with that. Also, I know many of you are familiar with Zoom meetings. I hear at least from one person that this is their first one. So I'm going to start with just sort of with some just reading just certain things that have to be said that make this a legal public hearing. So just bear with me as I just read this into the record, which I'll do in a second. And also just welcome everyone here and hope we have good discussion and good outcomes for both of these hearings. And I thank everybody's participation. Okay, so good afternoon. As chairman of the Albemarle County Board of Zoning Appeals, I call the meeting for December 1st, 2020 to order. This is an electronic meeting. Please be patient as we become familiar with this meeting alternative and virtual process. This meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with ordinance number 20-A, parentheses 14, an ordinance to ensure the continuity of governance during the COVID-19 disaster. The BZA meetings who are electronically present at this meeting are, and I will just read their names right now, is this Mr. Ed Robb, Randy Reinhardt, Bo Carrington, Marcia Joseph, and myself. The opportunities for the public to access and participate in the electronic meeting are posted on the Albemarle County website on the Board of Zoning Appeals homepage and on the Albemarle County calendar. Participation will include the opportunity to comment on those matters for which comments from the public will be received. I first want to establish a quorum. And just for the record, and let's start in the upper left-hand corner and sweep across the top and then take the second row and across the second row. And please, board members, announce your name as being present for the record. So Ed, start there and go across.
Ed Robb, present.
Randy Reinhardt, present.
Marcia Joseph, I'm present.
Yes.
John, we aren't always arranged the same way that everyone is on your screen. So
That is good to know. I won't, thank you for telling me.
And Bo Carrington, I'm present.
Thank you. And John Shepard, I'm still here. I would also like to introduce a couple of other people here. Andy Herrick is the attorney from the county. Thank you for your participation. Mr. Jim Bowling is here. He is the attorney for the Board of Zoning Appeals. Staff people here, Marcia Alley, who is recording clerk and the person doing all of the help with running the meeting right now with the zoning department. Francis McCall is here, who will be presenting the variance. Bart Savoda is here, zoning administrator. Frank Pohl is here, who is the county engineer. Have I mentioned everybody? Yes, and there'll be some more introductions, I'm sure, when we come to the appeal as well. So welcome, everybody. We now, I want to turn this to open a public hearing for project number VA 2020-00001, Corbett Agricultural Barn. The property owner is Michael and Michelle Corbett, and the staff for this variance hearing is Francis McCall. So with that, Francis, you have 15 minutes for your presentation. You can share that time with your attorney, Andy Herrick. And with that, I invite you to begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does everyone see my screen?
One other thing, is Mr. Corbett here or someone presenting for Mr. Corbett?
I believe I saw them in the attendees section.
Okay, Marcia, can we verify that and let Mr. Corbett sort of enter the come to the fore and enter the gallery?
I have now promoted Mr. Corbett to the panelist, so give him just a moment to arrive there. And Mr. Corbett, if you could just let us know that you are present.
We are present.
Okay, there we go. So everybody's where they
Good
need
to
to
see
be.
you. Thank you for being here.
Mr. Chairman,
And Mr. Corbett, right now, Francis McCall is going to make his presentation. We just wanted to make sure that you were in the gallery as well.
thank you.
If you could just mute your mic.
So can everybody see my screen?
Yes. Yes.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Francis McCall, Deputy Zoning Administrator. This is a variance 2020-00001 Corbett Agricultural Barn. The proposed variance application is to reduce the front setback to allow the construction of an agricultural barn. Here's a quick overview of what I'll be going over for the variance application. The property is in the western portion of the county at 8979 Dick Woods Road and is zoned RA rural areas. In the RA zoning district for any structure, the district requires a front setback of 75 feet from the front property line. The red square shows the proposed location of the barn and will be noted throughout the presentation. Here we see the overall topography of the area and the property itself and the proposed barn's relation to the property line. I'll zoom in here on this so you can see a little closer. Moving on for a little closer look, we see the building site and the proposed barn location. As noted in the staff report, the building sites on the property are the areas where there is no floodplain, critical slopes, or stream buffer. The preferred location for any structure is to be in a building site. Being a farm building, which this structure is proposed as, the structure is exempt from the Uniform Statewide Building Code and is not required to be in a building site. That said, the area where the proposed barn is located is in a building site, thus not disturbing the stream buffer, but would not meet the required 75 feet setback as required by the ordinance. For context, here is where the 75-foot setback would place the barn. Now to the specifics from the specifics of the request from the applicant. The applicant is requesting a variance from the rural area setback requirement to reduce the front setback of 75 feet to 36 feet to allow for the construction of the agricultural barn. I'll zoom in a little closer here as well. As noted in the staff report, the applicant applied for a permit to construct a barn for their agricultural operation. After review of the application, staff informed the applicant that to issue the permit for the barn in the proposed location, a variance would be required to be approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals. At this time, that permit has not been issued for the barn. Here we see the parking area for the dwelling that is on the property. The applicant can explain in more detail, but the retaining wall constructed many years ago for the parking area began to fail. The potential to improve the wall and incorporate a barn into the use with their agricultural operation presented itself. Submittal of a building permit brought the issue of the barn's location to light and the request before you today. Another picture of the site. So now to the specific regulations for granting a variance. It must be shown that a request for a variance meets both the definition of a variance as provided in Virginia Code and the criteria outlined in the zoning ordinance. Both are outlined in the staff report. Please note that both the definition and the criteria require that it be shown that the strict application of the ordinance would unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. As noted in the staff report as well, here's a quick overview of staff's analysis staff's analysis. The one criteria that staff is unable to provide a definitive recommendation for is whether the strict application of the 75-foot front setback would unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property or not. So staff does, so the question for the board that staff has not been able to make a recommendation for is, does the strict application of the 75-foot front setback unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property? Further deliberation of those facts by the board is needed after the hearing of the applicant's presentation. Staff does believe that granting the variance would alleviate a hardship due to physical conditions relating to the property, and believes that the 5 additional criteria for granting a variance have been met. Here are 2 possible motions, both in bold, for action by the board. I'm available for questions, as are other staff members as needed. I will now yield any additional time here to the Deputy County Attorney for any additional comments. And I can bring this motion back up once we get to that point in the deliberations.
Thank you, Francis.
Mhm.
Mr. Herrick, do you wish to add to that?
So, Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'm Andy Herrick with the County Attorney's Office. I really don't have much more to add beyond what Mr. McCall has already presented. As he pointed out, part of the definition of a variance is that the strict application of the ordinance would unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. And despite the applicant's good intentions and the other positives of this application, it's simply, the staff is simply not able to make that finding definitively. And that's why staff can't recommend this variance. But as Mr. McCall pointed out, that is something that the board can and should consider and discuss, is again, whether or not the strict application of the ordinance would unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. And again, that's what I have to add in addition to Mr. McCall's presentation.
Good, thank you. With that, I'm happy to follow a script here. Let me make sure I'm in the right place. So now, Mr. Corbett, I want to turn it over to you and invite you to make your case.
Okay, thank you. Let me see if we can share our screen to show the presentation.
And Mr. Corbett, if you let me know when you're ready, I'll let you know when we'll begin your time.
Okay, thank you.
Play. Okay.
Can everybody see my screen?
We can.
Okay.
Your
Good,
time begins now.
okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, esteemed members of the Board of Zoning Appeals and county staff. Last fall, after a 3-year search in western Albemarle County, we fell in love with a 13-acre farm named Whistling Hollow in Afton and placed it under contract. Until 2015, it was a successful family farm for over 30 years, raising sheep, geese, and ducks. Sadly, this farm had not been maintained by the most recent owners, who neglected the outbuildings, pastures, stream buffer, and garden bed for the past 5 years by allowing their horses to damage a delicate ecological refuge area. Since we purchased the farm a year ago in December of 2019, we have actively restored the garden beds, started growing crops for a local CSA market, established a new flock of chicken layers, and are actively partnering with a newly formed nonprofit called Pasture to Produce in Earlysville, who has donated over 6,000 pounds of fresh produce to local food pantries this past growing season. I'm a strong believer in giving back to the community. As a bit of background, I've been an active volunteer firefighter and paramedic for over 25 years. I'm currently a physician assistant at a local skilled nursing facility in Charlottesville, providing daily health care to our most vulnerable county residents, especially in this current pandemic. In preparation for buying the farm, I contacted the county engineer, Frank Pohl, who is with us today, in November of 2019, before we actually closed on the property, to discuss rehabilitating and sensibly expanding the historic 90-year-old farmhouse rather than demolishing it, which was an option that was presented, but we never considered, as well as constructing a new barn to be built adjacent to the farmhouse, as we would be building all this within or next to the stream buffer. I stressed to him throughout, and as well as throughout this process of my interactions with county staff, is that we want to follow the rules and hope to avoid any surprises in the future. He assured me that Mr. Pohl assured me that the farmhouse addition would be grandfathered in as an existing structure and could be expanded within the stream buffer, and that the barn would be allowed to be constructed if the land disturbance was under 10,000 square feet, and we submitted the appropriate farm use exemption form, which we did submit in July, which then prompted the review and subsequent variance application. I asked him if there were any other processes or permits to be performed, which he replied, quote, "I don't think so, but you may need health department approval." During many subsequent emails and a phone conversation, the need to explore the property line setbacks was not mentioned. We submitted the farm building form in July of 2020, and we're surprised to learn that the barn did not meet current setback requirements, and we would need to build in a different location, encroaching into the stream buffer. The barn, which we are proposing, and you can see on the screen, is a classic traditional structure. It was intentionally designed to minimize any new land disturbance and fit the existing topography and site features. This barn will allow us to replace several dilapidated outbuildings, house our farm vehicles, including a tractor and implements, and provide us space to process our crops. Our intention is to be good stewards of the farm and make conscientious choices to restore the health and productivity of the riparian area, pastures, and garden beds. We hope to build the current design in the proposed location for the following reasons. The barn is designed to minimize additional cut and fill by taking advantage of a retaining wall recently rebuilt to stabilize the only existing parking area on the site, which had been severely compromised. When the property was purchased, the current parking and access area was held up by a pressure-treated 6x6 retaining wall that was failing due to poor DIY construction, lack of care, and many years of significant water runoff from a neighboring property. As you can see from the picture, this was the only picture I could find, unfortunately, but you can see at the front that the 6x6 beams are perched fairly precariously at a 30-degree angle, and it was very concerning to us when we purchased the property. Due to increasingly heavy rains, it was clear that we would have no place to park and no means to access our house at grade. Upon removing the failing wood retaining wall, as you can see in this picture, severe storms resulted in further erosion of the parking pad, creating a dangerous situation and requiring the immediate installation of the concrete wall and backfilling. As you can see in the picture, the erosion did continue until we backfilled against the concrete wall. With the increased frequency of extreme rains and flooding, we have seen the stream behind our property, well, behind the house, within the property, jump out of its banks numerous times. We urgently see the need to invest in stream stabilization and revegetation strategies. We fear that adding another structure in the stream buffer will further compromise the function of the stream protection zone to absorb floodwaters, as well as put the structure and its uses at risk. By taking advantage of already established infrastructure, mainly the driveway, parking area, and retaining wall, these features do not need to be created or expanded into the productive pasture or the sensitive buffer areas. A strict enforcement of the setback requirement could result in either unsightly and expensive causeway from the existing parking area or the need for a new access road to be built through the stream buffer, as well as a significant redesign of the barn building. We are currently in the process of restoring and expanding the old farmhouse, which is located just 9.5 feet, as you can see from this picture, from Dick Woods Road, which makes for quite a noisy time, especially with the construction down the street at another project. The barn, to be located approximately 50 feet north of the farmhouse, will be 36 feet from the property line, from the right-of-way. The proximity of the original house to the road makes the barn feel significantly set back from the road in proportion, and is 8 feet lower than the road, which you cannot see on this plot, but it's pretty obvious in person. The barn will also be significantly obscured from the road by a new privacy fence that was just built, and it's still out of the riparian buffer, which we are seeking to remediate. The proposed location minimizes disturbance from construction in the stream protection area. We are working to improve the condition of the stream buffer for water quality, habitat, and flood mitigation purposes. And we don't want to offset our progress by converting a section of the stream protection area to a new building site. We are now being regularly visited by a blue heron in our stream, which we see as a positive sign that we are on the right track for stream restoration. We have met with both Corey Kirtland, who is the local NRCS district conservationist, and Anne Marie Roberts of the James River Association, utilizing their organizational resources to achieve these important stream buffer restoration goals. They have both confirmed the wisdom and the benefits of our proposed barn location. We are actively in the process of establishing the farm. And you can see this is the plan that we submitted to the James River Association Watershed Restoration Program that shows in green the proposed areas where we will be doing stream buffer restoration. And we are being told that this will likely happen this spring with new plantings. This program with James River Association, for those of you who don't know, has a goal of planting over 74,000 new seedlings throughout the river basin within the next 3 years, and we would love to be a part of that. We have spoken, that's all of them. We have spoken with all of our adjacent resident neighbors through this process, who have all pledged their support of the barn project and offered no objections. The names quickly are John and Marion Easter, Robert and Lynn Johnson, Gilbert and Etta Tallard, and Peter Gadwa. We appreciate the time and effort of the county staff to evaluate our variance application, as well as the guidance of our local supervisor, Ann Malik, who may be attending today's hearing, but I didn't see her show up in the attendance list. We appreciate her site visits and her support of our agricultural endeavors. A relevant point stood out from Mr. McCall's presentation, which states that staff believes that the property's physical conditions create a hardship for adequately locating the barn within a building site and meeting the required setback, and that the 5 additional criteria for granting the variance have been met. We believe that we have provided sufficient evidence to meet the requirements of County Code 18-34.4 in order to grant a variance. We believe that the strict application of the terms of the ordinance would unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property now and in the future. We thank you for working with us to find a mutually beneficial solution, which we all earnestly believe is in the best interest of the environment, our county, and our lovely farm. We sincerely believe that the most logical solution is to take advantage of the existing topography and site layout, minimizing any new land disturbance, protecting sensitive areas, and restoring agricultural use of this land, which is so important in the county as we struggle with new development on a daily basis. We plan to spend a great deal of time and money repairing and enhancing the current riparian buffer. So putting the barn further down onto the property from the current parking area will not only damage the pristine area we are trying to seek to preserve, but also infringe on the delicate stream buffer. These plans reflect the best practices and priorities enjoyed by the county. Thank you again for your consideration. We really do appreciate it. Michael and Michelle.
Thank you, Mr. Corbett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Ms. Corbett as well. Thank you for being here and for that good presentation. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak? We'll prepare to open a public hearing now if someone wants to speak to this issue.
Mr. Chairman, I do not see any hands raised for your request for your announcement, and I also did not have anyone sign up prior to the meeting.
Okay, so with that, I'm going to close the public hearing. And now I can, there's time now for staff and the applicant both to add additional comments if they wish to. Turn back to you, Mr. McCall, if you wish. You have another 5 minutes if you wish to clarify anything.
I do not have any additional clarification in need.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Corbett, you want to get something, anything else to add?
I did want to thank the county staff and the volunteer board members for your time. I must say, we have been so impressed with the professionalism, the courteousness, friendly nature of everybody that we have interacted with in the county. Having lived in some large urban areas nearby, we are not used to this. So my hat's off to everybody that this has been could be a very unnerving process that would cause somebody to lose a lot of sleep, but we feel very comfortable working with everybody. We're very glad of the decisions that we have made. So thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. So with that, I want to turn the discussion to board members. I'm going to just sort of go down the list and ask for you any comments, questions, discussion you wish to engage in, starting with Mr. Reinhardt.
Chairman, I visited the site yesterday, and incidentally to the Corbett's, your daughter was, I think it was a daughter, pardon me, it was pretty far away, was out on the porch. And I was a little nervous of scaring her or having a dog that was not going to invite me in. So I did not announce my visit. Mr. Chairman, I have really no questions. I support this variance, but I'll wait to hear from my fellow board members.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Joseph?
Well, not just, I always have a lot to say, but I'd like to ask the Corbetts and also Mr. McCall, whether or not you checked the side setback on that. Because it was making me nervous when I looked at one of the illustrations. Has that been checked?
Yes, I'm confident that it meets the 6-foot side setback that would be permitted for accessory structures.
Okay, thank you. I do feel that this is a hardship for the county if you decided to push this back into the WPO buffer. I think it's important for us to, when we have an ordinance like that, to adhere to it. So to push the barn back into the buffer means that there's a lot more disturbance going on in terms of the barn building itself, but also access to, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to have some major pathways to get equipment into that barn. I do feel that I would like to add some conditions onto this, if it is approved, that would reflect that the design of the barn should be as you have submitted. That is something that the BZA can ask for. You have submitted these beautiful drawings of the barn, and because it will only be 36 feet away from the property line, I would like us to consider adding that as a condition, that the barn itself be as reflected in attachment B, and that also the footprint dimensions of this barn be as reflected in attachment B. Because when you approve a variance, when it runs with the land, and if this thing is ever your beautiful barn is ever, if you decide to expand it, then you need another variance, okay? So that's one thing I was thinking about. The other thing I was thinking about is that you've shown us a sketch as attachment A. And I would like us to consider another condition that says that the barn will be located, and I guess the attorneys can help me out here, in general accord or whatever, as the location is illustrated on attachment A. And again, this is just giving us and future generations an idea of what was approved here. Okay. And the other thing is, I'll ask Mr. Pohl if he'd like to add to this, but I was wondering if he feels that there's any sort of mitigation plan that is required within this 100-foot WPO buffer, if all they do now is place the barn in this location.
For the barn, it appears the barn is outside of the stream buffer, so there would be no, in my opinion, there's no impacts to place the barn where it's proposed. So therefore, it wouldn't trigger any mitigation requirements.
Okay, and the other question I have for you, Mr. Pohl, is do you know anything about the James River Association and their advocacy for stream buffer renovation?
Specifically, do you have any specifics?
Have you ever heard of them before? I guess
I've
that
heard of
I
them.
had never heard of them before.
I have
don't
heard
know
of them,
what-
but
Yeah, and I don't know what work they've done or, you know, what their reputation is. That's all I was asking, is if you'd ever heard about them.
I've heard of them. I've not worked with them.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That, Mr. Chair, is pretty much all I have as far as comments are. But I'd like us to consider those conditions.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Joseph. Mr. Carrington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with my fellow board members in general. I agree with Mr. Reinhardt that I think this is an application that we can support, a request that we can support. And I also think that Ms. Joseph's conditions are reasonable. Would be obviously interested in hearing from the applicant from the whether that's acceptable or not. But in general, I'm supportive of this request.
Okay, thank you very much. I have some comments also. I will just sort of lower the suspense in the room by saying I'm also supportive of this application, but have some questions having to do with process and just a couple of things. One, I just have to say, I was surprised when I visited the site on Sunday to find that the full foundation for this building has been constructed. And I just want to say, I would have appreciated that being in the staff report. It changed my thinking about it, and from looking at the application and wondering if the building was in the right place or not, or if it should move. I was thinking I had some leeway there. And when I saw that the foundation was, poured concrete foundation to the, already installed, to me, it changed it changed my thinking about it. And I just don't think that was, I think it was not a good service to the board. I would also say that it brings up the question that if we were thinking about not approving this, then you would get into all sorts of issues having to do with, having gotten some assurance from county officials that something was okay when it wasn't. We would trigger that remedial state code provision that we grappled with about a year ago. And I just want to say it would have been helpful to me to have that in the staff report. I think it should have been. And along that line, I want to just make another thing clear. There are 3 different ordinances that are in play here: the water protection ordinance, the building code, and the zoning ordinance. Mr. Pohl, you are not the zoning person. You are administering the water protection ordinance. And I don't see where you have, I'm not calling you out on not warning them about zoning regulations about setbacks and stuff. So that's not, I'm very interested. I'm glad you are attending the hearing, because I wanted maybe some help and guidance on understanding the buffer, but that was what my request was about for that. Just want to say that as well. So I also have a question regarding the 2 sort of threshold criteria, one being whether granting of the variance would relieve an unreasonable restriction, and the other one has to do with does the land pose a hardship? And I view those 2 things, there's an or between them. And Mr. McCall, I want to understand, I want to clarify that and ask why. I mean, when I look at that, I see that while the request may or may not be alleviate an unreasonable restriction, which I kind of think it does. But I think couldn't we just, because there is an or in between those 2 paragraphs, just set that aside? And if you are finding that this does alleviate a hardship, I wonder why there's not a recommendation to approve this.
Mr. Chair, I realize that you were directing that question to Mr. McCall, but if I might attempt to answer that question.
Fair enough.
In 15.2-2309, you're correct, there is an or. But in order for the variance to be adopted, the definition section 15.2-2201, there's an and. And I realize we're now getting into the legal minutia here, but the definition of variance does include an and it does require that the strict application of the ordinance would unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. As we discussed in the refresher training session last month, there's no way around the unreasonable restriction, because again, it's an essential part of the definition.
Okay, thank you. So when we're making our final determination, yes, Mr. Bowen.
And I want to point out that the statute was amended fairly recently, but has not yet been interpreted by the Virginia Supreme Court. But I think the staff laid out its dilemma pretty well, but I think it's within the board's province to make a finding not only that there's a hardship here caused by the stream buffer requirements, but that's strict application of a 75-foot front setback would unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. And both findings are necessary in this particular case.
Okay, thank you.
I think that really the board's role is different from the staff's role in important perspectives because you're a quasi judicial body.
Thank you. Mr. Robb?
A little introduction here of myself to the applicant, and that relates to the fact that I lived in the Afton area from 1971. So I'm very familiar with the property, and went by it many times during my life. And I really admire what you're trying to do. I think that it's very reassuring to know that young folks want to make a difference here. And I also realize you have your hands full with that project.
Yes, thank you.
Now, having said all that good stuff, there is a metal building adjacent to your property. Is that correct?
Correct. That's part of the property. Yes.
That metal building that is shaped is a barn, is a shed.
Yes, sir.
Is that part of the property?
Yes.
And how far is that from? How long has that been there? Quite a while, or I don't remember, frankly, having seen that before. It looks relatively new, a metal building.
Based upon pictures that we have located, it's probably been there 15 to 20 years is my guess. Looking at some of the things that are failing, the roof is leaking at this point. So it was put in by not the people we bought it from, but the owners before that.
Okay, well, that building is it 75 feet back from the road?
It's my understanding that it is, yes, sir.
It is. And as I look at this topo map here, you have two parcels, right?
Yes, sir.
And how much frontage do you have on the road?
We've actually never had that measured. I'm guessing about a quarter of a mile, but don't quote me on that.
So then it's possible that you could put a building elsewhere on that property, or somebody could put it. Is it divisible?
The problem are the critical slopes.
Between the critical slopes and the stream buffer, it was determined by county staff that there was very few building sites on this property. Anything with road frontage, you're looking at with the barn. Anything further south is not a building site.
Was it divisible? That's my question. With that many feet of frontage, is it a divisible piece of property?
Mr. Robb, it is not. The two parcels no longer can be subdivided. They have to stay the size that they are, or there could be boundary line adjustments, but there's no new lots that can be created.
I see. But there's other building sites on your, considering you have two parcels, is there other building sites? If, in other words, as I understand it, to grant a variance like this, you're basically, it says there will be no other properties in that vicinity that would require a variance. Is that right?
Let's see the way that is worded.
Bart Swoboda, zoning administrator. Francis, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we were to determine the building sites under the current definition, there isn't one that would meet setback on that particular parcel. Is that correct?
On the subject parcel or the adjacent parcel?
Subject parcel.
I don't believe so. It's very tight. It's hard to tell on the backside there. Like I say in the report, there's a description of the two. We did not measure both of them, so it would be, you'd have to cross that stream to get to the other area that is, and do that stream crossing. So whether it then meets adequately for a dwelling or some other structure, that was not evaluated at the during this, but it is pretty tight compared just with some rough estimations that our GIS tools allow.
I don't know, Mr. Rob, if that addresses your question, I think about getting into the buffers and near the stream, that you would have to do that to cross the stream to get into any other areas.
With two parcels and that much frontage. However, I think if I recall correctly, what you're saying is on that particular parcel and all the parcels in that in that general vicinity, there is no other parcels that would require a variance that could be affected by a variance, right?
I think the question you're asking is criteria 2, that such need for a variance would not be shared generally by other properties. Is that the question?
Well, so you're saying we can't, they can't subdivide this property.
That's right.
Now, then there's other areas on the property where if a variance is granted, he could ask for a variance other places, other spots on this property, right? I'm sorry to say he, I say they could.
I believe that they would have the opportunity to ask for another variance, but how likely that would be granted with whatever might be granted here, or with this application, or with any of the conditions that might be placed on the variance.
Yeah, if there's concern about the variance traveling, let's say to a different structure, you could condition the variance to be specific to this structure.
And I believe that's what Ms. Joseph was trying to get to with the addition of the conditions.
Well, that's correct, but there's two parcels. We're only dealing with one parcel here.
Yeah, the other parcel is not subject to the variance.
Correct. Therefore, could there be a variance in the future related to that? Let's suppose, and you can't see into the future, of course. I wish I could. Is it possible that the Corbetts would sell one of those parcels, and there could be another request for a variance? Is that correct? Or
Yes.
or they could ask for another variance, and by the fact that we've set precedents by providing a variance here.
Well, each parcel would be reviewed on its own merit. So we would have to look at that parcel specifically, see if any other regulation would be applicable there. Like if there is a single family house on that parcel already, things like that. And so we would have to look at each one specifically. So a decision such as this doesn't necessarily present itself as precedence, because each one of these is an individual decision based on the criteria and the circumstances of each individual parcel. So there's
Correct.
nothing that would bind a decision or force an approval of a variance on an adjacent piece or any other piece within the proximity or zone the same.
That's correct. How far with this, with the new, with the variance that we're discussing, I'm going to say the south end of that barn, how far would it be from the buffer?
It's a guesstimate, but it could be anywhere between 5 to 10 feet. But as far as the backside of that, again, it's a guesstimate with the tools that we have at our disposal.
And then one other question, just to satisfy my curiosity, the idea that it would unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. Could I ask Mr. and Mrs. Corbett to explain to me how this variance would make a difference, or how not granting it would make any difference related to the reasonableness of the property?
We have a vision of a productive family farm that, as I outlined in my presentation, that we have been searching for many, many years. I see that having this barn on the property greatly expands our ability to do things such as to transition from a backyard gardener who might be able to provide greens for my family's meals to having the capability to provide food for the Pasture to Produce project. Working with produce, it's important to have facilities to be able to process and to clean the produce as it comes out of the field. We don't have the facilities to do that currently. I feel that that's an important piece, and this is the only spot that we have reasonably determined that we are able to build this sort of facility. And that is why we had reached out to county staff even before we closed on the property to ascertain that that was possible, that we would be able to move forward with what we had envisioned for this property. It was, as we mentioned, it was a 3-year search to find the right property that met our requirements.
In Albemarle County.
Yes, specifically in Albemarle County. We very specifically wanted to stay in Albemarle County. We have 2 young children who, one of you, Mr. Reinhardt, I think actually saw sitting on the porch whittling a piece of wood that day when you stopped by yesterday. So we wanted to we felt very strongly about the Albemarle County schools, and we wanted to stay within the county. So we're very excited about the possibility of moving forward with this. And we feel that if we aren't able to have this barn built, it will definitely change the trajectory of what we have envisioned for this property.
So you're saying if you don't get the variance, you wouldn't be able to continue with the ownership of the property and the goals and aspirations that you have. It's that critical.
Yes, sir. Correct.
What's the plan for that other building, that metal building that's further down the way?
That will be for animals. We plan to introduce other animals such as sheep, possibly cattle. In the future, we were told in your first year of farming, don't bite off more than you can chew. So we started with chickens. And we hope to expand reasonably, and that this red barn, this red structure, the metal structure, will help support keeping those animals.
Okay, well, I don't have any further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So, Mr. Bowling, I have a question. We have 2 steps to finish this up. One is we should make clear positive findings to support our decision, which means positive findings on both the question of the reasonable question and the hardship question, and also the 5 criteria that follow. I'm wondering if we can, I gather we should vote on that. And my question would be, can we take that as just one item and combine them into one, or should we go through each one separately?
Mr. Chairman, before we go there, I just have a couple of questions. Is that appropriate?
Absolutely.
Okay. Ms. Joseph, when your testimony just a minute ago, I just wanted you to know that going out there, their building is very set in concrete, literally. That was not just a retaining wall. The footings for the building that's designed, unless they should have overhangs or whatever, there isn't a possibility of addition to that building, to my way of thinking. The question to the culverts is, was that foundation put in by a surveyor so that you know for a fact, inclusive of overhangs, that you are comfortable with the requested footage away from the front footage distance that is being asked for?
Yes, we are. And we have no intention of expanding it. And we agree to the terms, conditions that Ms. Joseph has set forth for keeping the building within this specific site and abiding by the plans that were submitted that this will be the building as it has been, that will be built as proposed.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Also say I have drafted some two conditions that I think might satisfy everyone's concerns here. And we could talk about conditions now, or I would like to hold that in abeyance and first just carry the discussion through to making findings on the criteria. And
John,
Mr.
I just want to say that the intent of the rural areas in the Albemarle County ordinance is to promote agriculture. It's not to promote subdivisions. The last time I read it, may have changed, but the last time I read it, it was very clear as to promote agricultural activities. Agriculture has changed a lot in the past 5-10 years. We used to think of smaller lots as not being something that could be sustainable agriculturally, but we found that people are more concerned about where their food is coming from. They want to know who it is that grew it. They want to know where it was that it was grown. So I really do feel that this helps support exactly what the intent of the Albemarle County zoning ordinance says as it refers to rural areas. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I would actually say I agree with that. I haven't been focusing on, it's not perhaps within the absolute narrow scope of the review of a variance, but my sense from my visit of the site, reading the report, listening to the Corbett speak today, just all that adds to an appreciation for the efforts and that have gone into the planning of this project and their commitment to their project. So I say that as well. Other comments, or we can sort of bring this down to the nitty gritty of the approval process.
Mr. McCall, did you have a proposed motion or motions that you might be able to share on the screen?
Just a moment. There we go. That's what was originally proposed.
I would like to offer a slight variation on these two conditions. I just read them and see what you all think about this. Condition number 1, the proposed barn shall conform with the attached plan rendered in a black font. Anybody who Xeroxes that thing is going to be invisible. So let me just start over. A proposed barn shall conform with the attached plan rendered in a black font, revised 10/2/220, showing 4 elevations, basement floor plan, first floor plan, and second floor plan. That would be just confining the condition just to exactly to the building, not speak of the activities within it.
John,
yes.
John, you still haven't narrowed it down because you haven't said where it is. You need to refer, I believe it's either attachment D or attachment A. Which one are you referring to? Maybe
Okay.
Marcia can help you.
John,
Yes,
I don't really have a problem so much with 1 and 2. What I was suggesting is we add 3. That says the design of the barn should reflect the elevation and footprint dimensions included in attachment B. And then I thought condition 4 would be barn to be located in general accord with the location illustrated on attachment A.
I took the liberty earlier just to try to do something, but that's just me. And this is not for the,
Yeah, I just want something there with the dimensions. I do realize what our Mr. Reinhardt was saying, that the foundation is already there. But I just think everything should be on the 4 corners of the page so that when somebody goes back and takes a look at this, they know exactly what's supposed to be done. So we have reference materials that were given to us as attachments, and I'd like to reference the attachments so that people know what happened during this meeting and will know what's been approved, so that everyone walks away and understands what we're doing here. That was my thought on this. And I do like proposed barn may not be used as a dwelling unit. Thank you so much, Francis.
could I add to that? I would like to add, the proposed barn shall not be used as a dwelling unit or a homestay, which I think covers all of the things having to do with, B&Bs, Airbnbs, or other uses. It just clarifies that.
Andy, is that say adding new words? I mean, if it's a dwelling unit, it's a homestay, correct?
Not necessarily. It would need to go through the process of getting a clearance for the homestay. But as was pointed out earlier, that the board can impose additional additional conditions regarding the location, character, or other features of the proposed structure or use. So.
Okay, thank you.
Francis, would you in 2, would you reference the elevation? The design of the barn should reflect the elevation and the footprint dimensions, okay, that were on those drawings. So
say that one more time. To the design of the barn.
Of the barn should reflect the elevation and footprint dimensions. Footprint dimensions. And the proposed barn location must be in general accord as shown. I don't know, I'll ask the lawyers, is general accord an okay term for this?
General accord is fine with me. I would suggest, though, that the first part of condition 2 should be stronger than a should reflect. Probably should be either must or will.
Okay. I'm good.
Marcia, if you're good with that, I'll make the motion or I'll second your motion, whichever you would like.
Andy, at the same time, I feel like it's important that the board make findings in this case for the record to support its decision, to support the motion. Do you agree?
I think that the motion that's shown on the screen is sufficient. I think that granting the variance implies that the board has made the necessary findings, but it wouldn't hurt if the board wanted to make a motion to move to grant the variance.
Because I think the staff's right, in particular, that staff could not definitively state that the strict application of the 75-foot front setback would be unreasonably would unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. That is, that there's a residence there and they can use it as a residence. But I think the board has the discretion, for the reasons that the board members have enunciated here today, to find that strict application of the 75-foot front setback would unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property for the uses which the Corbetts and board members themselves have verbalized for today.
Well, the board could make a finding that the variance application met the definition of a variance in the Virginia Code and met all the requirements for a variance in the Virginia Code. That might be another way of the board making those findings.
I agree with what you just said.
Okay.
If I remember that, someone can remember that and make the motion would be good.
Could you repeat that, what you just said, Mr. Herrick, please?
Yes, that the board could, as part of its motion, make a finding that the variance application definition of a variance in the Virginia Code and met all the requirements for a variance in the Virginia Code.
So the board finds that the variance application definition in the Virginia meets the definition in the Virginia Code and met all requirements in the Virginia Code.
For a variance in both cases. And it could be phrased in such a way, I move that the board find that the variance application meets the definition of a variance in the Virginia Code and all the requirements for a variance in the Virginia Code, and to grant variance application and then go from what's shown on the screen.
Is it possible for somebody to write that in so the board members can read it?
How you doing on that, Francis?
If you can bear with me and my, if somebody could state it, I'll type it out.
I move that the board finds that the variance meets
Hold on. Finds that the variance
meets
meets,
the definition
bear with my spelling, I'm not a great typer, I'll fix that in just a second. Meets the definition
of a variance in the Virginia Code and meets all the requirements in the Virginia Code. Does that sound right to you, Andy and Jim?
I'm happy if you're happy.
Just a quick correction. I move that the board finds that the variance application meets the definition. Okay.
Okay.
And that the variance meets all the requirements for a variance in the Virginia Code.
For a variance. You talk faster than I write.
And then at the end of Virginia Code, it would be after Virginia Code, and that the board grant variance application and go from there.
Are you okay with that, Mr. Shepherd?
Yes. I have a question about, well, let's make sure we're settled at that point, and I want to go to the conditions first in a minute. Is everyone satisfied with that? With that motion as it's written there? Just as it's written, I'm not asking to vote on it right now. I am.
Can I call for the question?
Well, I have another, yes, but I have a question myself on number one, on the conditions. Do we want to say that the proposed barn is limited to the activities described by the applicant that support the farm? You know, it's almost like we can't, they wouldn't be able to do some other agricultural sort of thing in the barn if you strictly followed that condition. I'm not sure we want to condition the, you know, the activities within the building. I'm thinking of this more as being limiting the building. I don't know what the Corbetts might have to say about that also, but I don't see the,
No, I agree with you, Mr. Chairman. I think that's a good point. That it doesn't fall under the purveyance of this hearing to
Restrict
impose those limits
activities.
of activities. Like if my wife wanted to put a art studio and paint the beautiful mountains out the window, that she would be able to do something of that nature.
I wouldn't want to try to limit those sorts of activities in there. I mean, it's, other members have an idea about that or comments?
Yeah, I agree that 1 and 3 seem redundant, and I think 3 is probably the one that seems more applicable and sensitive to what I would consider us trying to limit. And so I would be in favor of deleting 1 in its entirety.
I agree with that.
Deleting 1 is okay with me.
It is okay with me.
Mr. Rob?
Thank you, Mr. Carring.
Fine.
Okay, and my final question would just be to Mr. and Mrs. Corbett. Do you have any questions, reservations, worries, comments on the conditions as we've set them out here?
Mr. Chairman, I agree with the conditions that are being proposed.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a motion?
Marcia, are you going to make the motion or I'll make it either way?
Here. I move that the board finds the variance application meets the definition of variance in the Virginia Code, and that the variance meets all of the requirements in the Virginia Code, and that the board grant variance application VA 2020-00001 Corbett Agricultural Barn to allow the proposed barn to be located 36 feet from the right-of-way of Dick Woods Road, a variance of 39 feet, with the following conditions. 1, the design of the proposed barn must reflect the elevation and the footprint dimensions, and the proposed barn location must be in general accord as shown in attachments A and B. 2, the proposed barn may not be used as a dwelling unit or a homestay.
Great. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Ellie, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Reinhardt,
Aye.
Ms. Joseph,
Aye.
Mr. Rob. Mr. Rob, you're muted.
Aye.
Mr. Carrington
Aye.
and Mr. Shepherd.
Aye. Good luck, Mr. and Mrs. Corbett.
Thank you so much. You just made our year.
This is good. So just best wishes. Thank you for your just thank you for what you're doing, and good luck with it. And okay.
Yes,
And thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Shepherd, could we do a 5-minute break?
No, we have to keep working. I'm sorry. I think that would be a good idea to take a break. What time is it now? We could set a definite time to come back.
It's 3:20 right now.
Okay, so 3:25, is that good for everybody?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll see you back in 5 minutes. variance. And then in a couple of minutes, we're going to do the other one. Yeah, but that was that was easy, but that had no public comment. This is going to be a little bit more difficult. That was good.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, it's 3:25. If I could go ahead and see if would it be all right with you if I ask about other folks who want to sign up for the public hearing?
Yes, I would appreciate that.
So hello, everyone. We'll be re-adjourning and just reconvening in just a moment. And we will be going into our next public hearing, which will be the Appeal 2020-003 North Point and Stewart Wright. At this time, if you have not already signed up to speak for this public hearing and would like to do so, please signify by raising your hand in Zoom. If you're calling in by phone, you can do that with *9 and signify, and I can add you to the list. It appears that we have everyone we need, or everyone who's interested at this point. We will offer another opportunity later on.
Okay. So are we all here? Let's see, everything is Mr. Bowling back and Mr. Herrick is here. I think everyone's here. Is muted. All right, I think we can. Mr. Bowling, Mr. Pohl, are you here?
Frank Pohl is present.
Okay, thank you. I think everyone's here, but Mr. Bowling.
I'm here. I'm just eating lunch.
Oh, okay. Have at it. So with that, let's come back to order. And I want to introduce project number Appeal 2020-00003 North Point Plan Development Mixed Commercial Development. The appellant is Stewart Wright. Bart Svoboda is going to, is the staff for this. And I'm ready to, Bart, if you're ready with your staff report, you have 15 minutes total. You can share your time with Mr. Herrick. which will be followed by Mr. Wright's presentation. Same ground rules.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Shepherd, before
Yes.
Mr. Svoboda begins, I just wanted to make everyone aware that many years ago, I worked with Great Eastern Management as a consultant on one project for them. And I just wanted to make sure that I noted that this will not affect my comments or any decision that I make on this appeal AP 2020-00003. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to try and share our screen. Are we sharing?
Yes, you can
Yep.
see that.
Okay.
Your
All right,
time
so-
begins, your time will begin now.
So as stated, we're here for Appeal 2023. This is for the North Point property. This hearing is regards to construction entrances along Pritchett Lane, specifically condition number 9 of special use permit 2002-72. Oops. This is a layout of the property. You can see what's in purple is the property that is the subject of this particular appeal. This is regarding the construction entrances again, which is customarily an incidental use to and usual use to all development and all building. Special use permit condition 9 is now on your screen. Talks about extensions, and specifically 9A extensions to Pritchett Lane. These are the minimums of what the developer must provide. There is no prohibition listed in there for the construction entrances. Again, construction in and of itself within the zoning ordinance is not a listed use. It's subordinate to the construction of a house, a bank, any other development. This is an example in your staff report is example number 3 that talks about construction traffic management plan. This is a rezoning that took place in 2013. It's 2013 number 12, and it specifically addresses what to do with construction traffic. We do have a few of these. This particular one is out near Glenmore, but when the board accepts a proffer regarding construction traffic and management, it is clear within the language about what that means. And this is that example within number 3 included in your staff report. The other examples within your staff report talk about how the board prohibits uses, and it's very specific that this is not permitted in those uses.
Art, this is a condition of that rezoning in where is this, Glenmore?
Yes, in 2013. Yep.
Okay.
So this is, again, it's not a condition. This is a proffer. So the board, this was offered by the developer and the board accepted this condition. The special use permit, you can place conditions on it. The board can place conditions on it. So they're a little bit different. The example would be in the language that it's clear when they want to prohibit something, it's clear on how they want to handle that.
Okay.
And so in the summary, on September 21st of 2020, myself, the zoning administrator, issued an official determination of no violation found. We inspected the property. We looked at the proffers and conditions. There was no prohibition to prohibit construction access on Pritchett Lane. And so that determination was made. Because the determination was and is correct, zoning administrator asks that the board does uphold and affirm the determination. I'm not going to relinquish the remainder of my time to Mr. Herrick.
Thank you, Mr. Swoboda. Again, I'm Andy Herrick with the County Attorney's Office here on behalf of the zoning administrator. And I'd like to share with the board today 5 reasons why I think that the zoning administrator's determination is correct and should be affirmed. As Mr. Swoboda mentioned, the special use permit conditions are a floor, not a ceiling. They require minimum improvements to be made by the applicant, by the developer. And you can see before you, I've asked that Mr. Swoboda, at least for a time, leave the conditions up there. And in reading them, you'll see that condition 9, this is also, by the way, on page 32 of your materials, and it's on page 4 of Exhibit B. And you'll see that it requires the owner to construct certain minimum improvements. The conditions do not limit the developer's ability to go above and beyond the minimum that's required. And again, we discussed last month how it's important to look at the actual wording, the words on the page of these conditions. And I'd note that there are not nots and not onlys on these conditions. If this were a limit on the ability of the developer to make additional improvements, you'd expect to find somewhere in these conditions a not saying this may not be used for construction, or it shall be only used for emergency access. As a matter of fact, if you look at these requirements carefully, you'll see that this is actually laying the groundwork for a potential future expansion into a full, or at least has the potential to allow for a potential expansion to a full public right-of-way. You'll note that it's required that they be reserved within 50-foot rights-of-way, and specifically condition 9A1 talks about how it shall be designed and graded to accommodate a minimum Virginia Department of Transportation standard for a public street. So what this does is it requires the developer to design these entrances initially for emergency purposes, but it leaves open the possibility of a future expansion. So far from limiting this to emergency access only, it requires a construction of these as access points for now, but allows them to be eventually developed into a fuller access. The second reason why I think that the zoning administrator's determination is correct is that the construction of permitted structures is a permitted accessory use. I think that the appellant in his argument mistakenly argues that construction of permitted structures is a use unto itself, and then makes the argument that since construction isn't specifically listed as a permitted use, that it must not be a use permitted. But construction of permitted structures is necessarily implied. For example, if someone had a building permit to construct a single family dwelling in a residential area, the argument that construction is a use unto itself would prohibit that single family dwelling from being built in a residential area, because the argument would be construction is not a permitted use in a residential district, therefore you can't construct a single family dwelling. Doesn't make much sense. The applicant in this case put in a lot of time and effort to have a development approved with all the uses that were spelled out in its application. To then say that it can't construct the structures that were approved in its development doesn't make much sense. I point out that the special use permit conditions don't explicitly permit a construction access onto Route 29 either. So again, following the appellant's argument, if the special use permit doesn't allow access onto Pritchett Lane, and it doesn't explicitly allow access onto Route 29 either, you've effectively blocked the applicant from constructing the project that was duly approved by the Board of Supervisors. The third point I'd make is that I saw that one of the appellant's submissions was a letter dated 2006 from Great Eastern Management. And for better or for worse, that's not something that can be used as the basis to prosecute a zoning violation. What the appellants are essentially asking the county to do is to find that there was a violation of the zoning ordinance and to prosecute the owner for a violation of the zoning ordinance. But when our office goes into court, we need to do so on the basis of a violation of an ordinance rather than anything that might contradict a letter that was written by a developer, again, that's 14 years old. I think the fourth reason to support the zoning administrator's finding in this case is to point out that Pritchett Lane is a VDOT maintained public road. And unless and until travel on that road is restricted by VDOT, not by the county, but by VDOT, Pritchett Lane is open to the motoring public. VDOT is the one that controls access to and use of the road. Again, the motoring public has the right to use that road in the absence of restrictions by VDOT. And the fifth and final point I bring up is that the water protection ordinance in this case really doesn't dictate the outcome. I noticed that there are a number of questions regarding the applicability of the water protection ordinance, both in this case and in our prior case. But as the chair noted in the prior case, water protection ordinance enforcement and appeals are really outside of the BZA's scope and jurisdiction. The BZA is here to hear appeals of zoning determinations rather than any sort of water protection ordinance issues. So again, I appreciate the appellant's frustration. I'm sure that the residents of Pritchett Lane don't appreciate the additional construction traffic, and I certainly sympathize with that. But I would say that the unmet expectations there are the result of a fundamental misunderstanding of the special use permit conditions. Again, those are a floor that require the developer to make certain improvements, but not necessarily a restriction or limitation on what those entrances can be used for. So that concludes my remarks. I'm happy to turn it back over to Mr. Svoboda or to see if any of the board members have any questions of either of us.
Okay. Thank you. I think at this point we bring it open. We open the public hearing. Marcia,
You need to hear from the applicant.
We have Mr. Wright available,
Wait.
and I'm also going to be,
I'm totally sorry, Mr. Wright. I'm sorry for that. I get ahead of myself sometimes.
I'm also going to move Mr. Mitchell into the panelist gallery as a representative for the North Point project. So if you will just both give me just a moment to do that.
All right, thank you.
And Mr. Mitchell should be arriving momentarily. And Mr. Wright, as soon as I can find you on my page, we'll have you unmute your mic. And it appears that everyone is in attendance in the gallery, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So, Mr. Wright, when you are ready.
All right, I am ready. Good afternoon, members of the Board of Zoning Appeals. My name is Stuart Wright. I live on Pritchett Lane. I'm here today to appeal the zoning administrator's determination that construction access points on Pritchett Lane are compliant with the zoning ordinance and condition 9, specifically 9A of the special use permit, 2002-72. Since my first complaints in February, I have been told by staff they couldn't find anything written that specifically prohibits construction access points on Pritchett Lane. When I worked in zoning for almost 14 years, I was taught by the previous zoning administrator and the county attorney that you must always find where a proposed use is allowed, not prohibited, because the zoning ordinance is an inclusive ordinance. So I tried to find where it says construction access points on Pritchett Lane are allowed. What do the words on the page say? While I completely agree with zoning that the condition 9, specifically 9A, does not prohibit a construction access point as worded, it also does not allow it. Condition 9A only addresses the connections to Pritchett Lane that were approved by ZMA 2000 number 9. 2 emergency access easements were the only connections shown on the ZM application plan. They were reviewed by staff for compliance with the district regulations and later approved by the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors as part of that rezoning. The emergency access easements were the only type of connections that could comply with the district regulations spelled out in section 25A.4.1 regarding vehicular access, and therefore were the only types of connections approved. Construction access points along Pritchett Lane were never proposed by the developer. They were not shown as an element of the approved application plan, and therefore were never reviewed or considered by staff, the commission, or the Board of Supervisors, no doubt because a construction entrance would not be able to comply with the section 25A.4.1. Therefore, since condition 9A only applies to approved connections, a construction entrance does not comply with the conditions of the special use permit. Before I move on to the second part of my argument, I want to remind the BZA that North Point is a planned development. It is not a conventional development. Planned developments go through a much more rigorous review process. Part of that review process is a transportation plan that shows projected automobile and truck traffic that will be generated and provides estimates of traffic to and from the site. The review process also involves community meetings and citizen input. Another large part of the review process is the application plan, which shows proposed lot layouts, streets, commercial centers, and other important elements that must be reviewed. Points of access and types of access are important elements that must be shown on the application plan when the proposed rezoning is going through the review process, so that staff, the commission, and the board can make sure everything works without creating harmful impacts to the surrounding areas, such as traffic hazards, noise, traffic congestions, and other dangerous situations. This also applies to any special use permit required for use in the planned development. The Board of Supervisors must, among other things, consider whether the proposed special use will be a substantial detriment to adjacent parcels, public safety, health, and welfare, and preventing traffic congestions and other hazardous conditions as stated in section 33.40 of the ordinance. The board may also impose conditions to limit impacts of the same nature to ensure public safety, health, and welfare. Now to the second part. The zoning administrator made the written determination that the construction access points are compliant with the zoning ordinance. That is not correct. The construction access point he has allowed on Pritchett Lane has actually created a violation of the district regulations, specifically section 25A.4.1, vehicular access, which states pavement widths and strengths of both internal and external roads shall be adequate to accommodate projected traffic generated by the district. Construction traffic is part of that projected traffic generated. The only way it couldn't be is if this regulation stated external roads shall be adequate to accommodate projected traffic generated by the district after construction is complete or post-construction. If that is really the intent of this section, then the county should consider a zoning text amendment to address that. The zoning administrator failed to look at this section of the zoning ordinance. When the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors approved the ZMA and the special use permit, the only connections to Pritchett Lane they approved were the 2 emergency access easements. They did not approve a construction access point. They approved them because the emergency access easements will generate practically 0 traffic onto Pritchett Lane. The projected traffic generated by an emergency access easement complies with 25A.4.1 all day long. Staff, the commission, and the board never reviewed or even considered approving a construction entrance because it was never proposed during the rezoning by the developer or staff. It was not shown on the application plan. If the developer absolutely had to have construction access from Pritchett Lane, shouldn't that have been addressed during the rezoning and shown on the application plan? You even have a letter from the developer encouraging the residents of Pritchett Lane to attend the last public hearing before a vote on the proposed rezoning to support him in advocating for no other connections other than emergency access from North Point to Pritchett Lane. The same developer that then came back to zoning 13 years later to ask if they could use the emergency access for construction entrances. Please remember that. So what is the projected traffic generated by the 2 emergency access easements shown on the application plan? No more than 5 vehicle round trips per year. More than likely 0 trips per year since there are 4 approved commercial entrances to this development. These 4 entrances were supposed to be where construction traffic enters the property. 2 of these entrances have been constructed. The stream crossing has been completed, so now the developer has full and unfettered access to the property. When the zoning administrator decided to allow the construction entrances, he changed the projected traffic generated by the development that was reviewed during the rezoning process. So now the question is, what is the projected traffic generated by a construction access point to a new planned development? I don't know what that projected number is, but from what I've observed in my front yard while timing truck trips with my watch is over 320 round trips per day at its peak. This went on for months and months at that rate, so we are looking at over 1,500 trips per week, over 6,000 per month. And these are not small vehicles. These are dump trucks weighing over 50,000 pounds each loaded. The oversized tractor trailers hauling in large heavy equipment weigh even more than that and they are over 10 feet wide. This is what happened when the zoning administrator approved construction access points that weren't even discussed during the rezoning. We went from no traffic impact to more huge trucks rolling down a road than we could have ever imagined. Thousands of truck trips and counting. Please remember that Pritchett Lane is an old minor public road. It does not even meet the minimum width requirement of 20 feet required by the county for a private road. Certain places are only 16 feet wide at the beginning of the road, and now we've got vehicles over 10 feet wide and 60 feet long rolling down our road. I have had to pull off the road or back way up to let them pass. Not a safe situation at all. How did the zoning administrator determine that Pritchett Lane was wide enough or strong enough to support this new type of traffic on Pritchett Lane? The biggest and heaviest traffic you can put on the road with absolutely no time limits of duration. This can go on for years and years. I have no idea how he did that. I do know that the zoning administrator is not qualified to do that. According to my contacts at VDOT, the only way to do this would have been to hire a testing agency or engineering firm to go out there, survey the road, measure pavement width, and do core samples through the road to see what's underneath it to determine the road strength. Pritchett Lane is a very old road, so there are no construction records for it. The zoning administrator should be able to show us some form of documentation that this was done prior to his decision to allow Pritchett Lane to be used for unlimited construction access. Remember that his actions have now completely changed the projected traffic generated by the development. It has changed dramatically. He can't provide any documentation of this because it was never done. We know that Pritchett Lane is not strong enough to handle this type of traffic. Pritchett Lane is falling apart because of all the heavy construction traffic it has to endure now. I've sent you the photographs of the damage that's occurred, especially right at the construction entrance where the developer has already had to repair the road. I think I have now very clearly shown that the construction entrance is not in compliance with the zoning ordinance. The zoning administrator actually created a zoning violations by his actions, no doubt about it. I must admit that I was wrong when I said zoning staff had administratively amended the conditions of the special use permit. They didn't. They allowed a construction access point that was never proposed during the rezoning process and was never shown on the approved application plan, and therefore was never reviewed or approved by planning staff, the commission, or the board. So basically, zoning staff amended the approved application plan of the rezoning without a full staff review or a legislative action by the commission or the board. The zoning administrator also stated in the staff report that there is nothing prohibiting specific accessory uses from being added. Section 21.2 of the ordinance states, uses and structures which are customarily accessory and clearly incidental shall be permitted, provided the establishment of the same, the accessory use, shall not be permitted until construction has commenced on the principal building or the principal use has been established. Well, there appears to be a conflict there because no principal building has been constructed and the principal use of the property, mixed commercial and residential uses, has not been established on the property yet. It's nothing but dirt out there. I do know that the zoning administrator cannot approve an accessory use that creates a violation of district regulations, which is exactly what he has done. So I'll now summarize my argument. The special use permit condition 9A only addresses the two emergency access easements that were approved by the rezoning and were shown on the approved application plan. No other types of connection to Pritchett Lane were approved by the rezoning, so the construction entrance there is not allowed. Therefore, it cannot possibly be in compliance with the conditions of the special use permit. The addition of the unapproved construction entrance approved by the zoning administrator changed the projected traffic generated by the district. Again, the only connections to Pritchett Lane that were approved by the legislative approval of the ZMA were the two emergency access easements. Section 25A.4.1 requires that pavement widths and strengths of external streets being used as access to the district shall be adequate to accommodate projected traffic generated by the district. The zoning administrator's action drastically changed the projected traffic generated by the district. He did not make any attempt to verify that Pritchett Lane is wide enough or strong enough to adequately accommodate the massive amount of heavy equipment traffic he has now permitted. He did not verify compliance with section 25A.4.1. As a result, Pritchett Lane, the external roads used as access to North Point now, is failing and deteriorating as a result of the thousands of vehicle trips by heavy equipment. If the construction entrance was not approved by the rezoning and now has resulted in non-compliance with section 25A.4.1, then it is not in compliance with the zoning ordinance. And I now want to close with a question that the BZA and county staff should all ask themselves now. Why do we have all these rules, regulations, processes, and procedures in place to prevent this sort of thing from happening, and then turn around and let it happen anyway? What's the point? Ask yourself that. Why bother if it's so easy to get around the rules and the regulations? Why bother trying to protect our neighborhood and our road and then turn around and hammer them? I base my entire argument on what the words on the page say, not what they don't say, as the zoning administrator has done. I hereby ask the Board of Appeals to overturn the zoning administrator's determination that the construction access points on Pritchett Lane are compliant with the zoning ordinance and special use permit condition 9, specifically 9A. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer any questions the BZA may have of me at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. It's a good presentation. Now it is time to turn to public hearing. I'll ask you all to bear with Marcia for a moment to set forth the meeting guidelines for the public hearing. Marcia, are you prepared to do that?
I am. Thank you.
Thank you.
As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. If you wish to comment during this public hearing and have not already notified the clerk prior to the meeting, you may do so at this time. If you are participating via the web, use the raise your hand icon to notify me that you would like to comment on this particular public hearing item. If you are participating by telephone, please press *9 to notify me that you would like to comment on this particular public hearing item. The clerk will introduce each speaker for comment. Timekeeping is conducted through a timer. The timer will commence when you begin speaking. You will be notified when 3 minutes has ended, and you are requested to bring your comments to a close as your microphone will be muted after a few seconds. In order to give all speakers equal treatment and courtesy, the BZA requests that speakers adhere to the following guidelines. When called to address the BZA, please state your name. For uncommon spellings, please spell your name for the record. Address comments directly to the BZA as a whole. Open public debate is prohibited. You may email written statements and other relevant material to be included in the record at boardofzoningappeals@albemarle.org. If you represent a group or organization, you may identify the group to be recognized. If you exceed your allotted time, you will be asked to end your comments and the microphone will be muted. If a speaker does not use all allocated time, the unused time may not be shared with another speaker. Speakers are permitted one opportunity to comment during each of the public comment periods per meeting. Mr. Chairman, at this time, I don't show any raised hands after that announcement. I'm going to do one more quick look, but I don't see any indication of added speakers. So at this time, our first speaker is Tom Bredes Ruiz. And Mr. Bredes Ruiz, if you will unmute your mic and you may begin speaking. When you begin speaking, I will begin timing. You have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. I have been asked by my wife to submit this statement to the Board of Zoning Appeals. She's a nurse who couldn't attend this Zoom meeting because she's needed as a frontline healthcare person. Years ago, when the council approved North Point, along with many neighbors, I attended a planning meeting with developers and designers. We broke into groups to discuss what we residents would want in this adjoining new neighborhood. Though I oppose the development due to its high density and proximity to my neighborhood, I was encouraged that they wanted to work with us. Each group, I think, there were approximately 5 groups with about 10 local citizens, unanimously agreed we did not want North Point to have any road access onto Pritchett Lane. We were hounded that the developer needed emergency access. We relented, saying, okay, emergency access only. After the meeting, several of us met outside and shared our suspicions that we had been duped, and eventually this promise would be broken. We were correct. We now have a busy construction entrance, which some weekdays sees a minimum of 50 trucks in an 8-hour period. Our country lane is not a paved road. We are a tar and gravel road that, after several decades, resembles a paved road, but doesn't have the underlying structure of a road made to support the frequency of large truck traffic that we have seen since the beginning of North Point constructions. We have sinking, cracking, and increased frequency of potholes. The width of our road is designed for no more than 2 large cars to pass. There's no shoulder, and in places, a small strip of grass separates the road from the culvert. For the 27 years I've lived on Pritchett Lane, it's been known as a scenic and safe road for walkers, bikers, and joggers. This foot traffic has only increased in the past 5 years since more young families have moved into our neighborhood. As huge logging trucks and oversized vehicles carrying gigantic cement structures flow up and down our road, we were told this was necessary to join the eastern and western portions of the development. Now the ravine separating these areas has been bridged. There's a new paved entrance onto the development from Route 29 North. 29 North is a highway built for this type of vehicle and traffic, but still our lane continues to see heavy truck traffic. Our lane was approved for emergency entrance, nothing else. I don't believe it is fair, safe, or legal using it for construction traffic just because no one wrote it couldn't be used for a construction entrance. As a longtime homeowner on Pritchett Lane, taxpayer and voting citizen of Albemarle County, I feel taken advantage of by the developers of North Point. Just as we suspected at the planning meeting many years ago, we were duped. Trust has been broken, the quiet nature of our road is destroyed, and the safety of our pedestrians and neighborhoods is jeopardized. It is past time to do the just and sensible thing and move construction traffic through the Route 29 North entrance. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you. Marcia, who is the next speaker?
So, Mr. Chairman, our next speaker is George Delagana. I want to ask, while Mr. Delagana is getting prepared, can you hear the timer bell?
I was unable to hear it.
Could any of our board members hear that?
No.
Oh, you did not? Okay. So I just want to be clear. Mr. Britas Ruiz, you did go over just a couple seconds. I knew you were winding down, so I went ahead and let you finish. I just want to give everybody a reminder of 3 minutes is time. What I will do is I'll let you know when 3 minutes is up, and just as we just did, we'll give you just a couple seconds to go ahead and close your final statement. But I hate to interrupt you to indicate that your 3 minutes is up, but if you can't hear the bell, then I'm going to have to, and I apologize for that interruption on the front end. So, Mr. Delagana, the timer will begin when you begin speaking.
I want to thank the board for listening to our concerns here. And I want to particularly thank Mr. Wright for his expertise on the particular issue. My name is George Delagana, spelled Dellagana. I live here on Pritchett Lane. And my wife called in February when the North Point Construction Company began to work on their access road because it was quite apparent that it was going to be a violation of what they had agreed to back when we went to the homeowners meetings back 10 or 12 years ago. At that homeowners meeting, it was more of a sales pitch by North Point to try to convince us that they weren't going to impact our neighborhood and that they were going to keep Pritchett Lane as a rural road without a heavy amount of traffic where people walk and ride their bicycles and that sort of thing. Obviously, the heavy construction vehicles on the road appear to be a violation of that assurance from the North Point. It's just another example of a big company with lots of money and lawyers and those sorts of things. And 10 years ago, when they made promises, breaking those promises and then trying to run over the local neighborhoods who have got no authority. And quite frankly, we wouldn't be having this meeting if it wasn't for Mr. Wright, because although we complained about it, we had no idea as to how the process works to be able to get ourselves before the board to hear what our concerns were. So I want to particularly thank him for having worked us through that process. I read through the documents that were prepared by Mr. Svoboda, and particularly his permit conditions, which says that not allow for temporary construction easements as a type of extension to Pritchett Lane. Although the proffer's conditions do speak to various road standards, they do not prohibit the use of construction entrances. Okay, so, and he calls the construction entrance an accessory. Okay, so first of all, he talks about it being temporary and then it's an accessory. Now, I'm not a lawyer and that sort of thing, but I do have a dictionary and I do have the internet and that sort of thing. So I kind of looked up what those kinds of things mean. And temporary to me, you know, I mean, there's lots of things that are temporary, pretty much everything. But how long that temporary is going to go on for here when you're building a huge neighborhood such as North Point, you know, is hard to say. As far as zoning ordinance go, I understand that an accessory is subordinate to a principal use for something. So the principal use for those access points along Pritchett Lane was to be an emergency access, not a construction area that was being used all the time. So we're talking about a principal use versus an accessory use. And I think that what we've got now is a principal use being the construction road, not an accessory use for that particular issue. Now, I know I don't have a whole lot of time here, but one thing I would like to say, you know, the horse has kind of left the barn. We have a construction, whether we like it or not, going down Pritchett Lane. And I hear the buzzer. I will wrap up. Thank you. So even if the board approves or doesn't stop this, I would like to ask that you specifically deny a second construction road between lots L16 and L17 north of the church. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Mr. Chairman, our next speaker is Dwayne Smith. Mr. Smith, you may unmute your mic. And your timer will begin when you begin to speak.
Yes, my name is Dwayne Smith. I live on Pritchett Lane. I've been here since 1969. When I came here, the road here was a dirt gravel road. So like Mr. Wright says, the road is not feasible for all the heavy trucks and traffic that's coming in for the construction for North Point. And it's not wide enough. And you have school buses right now are coming in and people are traveling back and forth, and with the heavy equipment and with dump trucks and what have you, people can't get by. You have to stop. And some of the trucks are running very fast, and people that are walking or kids out playing are too dangerous to have that kind of construction work on Pritchett Lane. And when we went to the meetings back in the days when they was bringing this up, just like the other parties have said, they told us that only going to be for emergency exit only, fire trucks, emergency vehicles only. Now you got construction coming in, and I don't think it's feasible for this type of road right now. And another thing, who's going to pay for the road if the road start deteriorating on down the road next year or whatever? Cold weather comes in. Is the construction company going to do it from there all the way to Prophet Road? Probably not, just probably in the front area. And another thing, then I thought it was supposed to be a buffer on Pritchett Lane. from North Point. And as you go down Pritchett Lane, all the trees are cut down there. I thought it was supposed to be some kind of buffer between Pritchett Lane and North Point, but it's wide open. So my point is, I hope y'all vote on and council or have them use the main road coming off 29 or down Leaks Road coming off of Prophet Road. Because it's unsafe for the whole neighborhood. And I appreciate you taking concern of this. And Mr. Wright, thank you very much for all your help of putting this in. And thank you all board members. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Mr. Chairman, our next speaker is Gladys Bryant.
Thank you.
Ms. Bryant, your time will begin when you begin speaking.
Thank you. Yes, my name's Gladys Bryant, and I've been a Pritchett Lane resident for over 50 years now, 53 years actually. And so I've seen our neighborhood change some over the years, but even so, it still remains a dead-end road, and it's a rather quite quiet neighborhood still. So several years ago, when plans were beginning, people started talking about the North Point development. We, the whole community here, we were concerned about the possibility of them having access from the development area onto Pritchett Lane. And so we raised our concerns at that time. I know I especially talked to our county supervisor at that time and raised concerns about it. But anyway, he said that there were no plans for any access to be made from that development onto Pritchett Lane. And then my husband went to some planning meetings along the way, and whereby we were told that there would only be emergency access onto Pritchett from that development. So needless to say, we've been very disappointed with all this construction traffic that's now on Pritchett. So not only has there been a lot of large tractor trailers and dump trucks and that sort of thing on the road, but the noise level is a constant thing because of sometimes the traffic is bumper to bumper all day long. And so you put up not only with the vehicles going up and down the road, but there's the noise factor also. And then people who walk or bike on the road, they have to be extremely careful because the road is not that wide and it doesn't have any shoulders and it doesn't have any sidewalks or any place to get out of the road. And so on occasion, people have to actually get into the ditch in order to get out of the way of those big trucks. And so it's my understanding that the developer's use permit to build the division, the North Point, that his permit didn't include permission to use the emergency access for construction traffic. But of course we know that's what's happening. And so since he didn't get his permit amended or approved through the Board of Supervisors, which I understand is the normal mechanism, I'm really concerned that the same sort of go around will happen when the development is finished and general traffic will be permitted on Pritchett. Anyway, requesting that construction traffic in that we can get some assurance that long-term from North Point onto Pritchett will not be permitted. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I asked if folks respect the buzzer, respect the time limit. It's a courtesy to all the speakers, everyone here. I would appreciate that. Marcia, who is next?
Mr. Chairman, our next speaker is Richard Kale. Mr. Kale, your time will begin when you begin speaking. One moment, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Let me double check. It looks like Mr. Kale may have left the meeting. No, he's still here. Hold on. Mr. Kale, are you
Hello.
available?
Hello, my name is Richard Kale, and I am a resident on Pritchett Lane. I wanted to start off by thanking Mr. Wright. And I understand when we're looking at issues like this, myself as a resident is a small little French fry. You know, we have a multi-million-dollar company and lawyers. I just hope that the county moves forward with ensuring that they're being legally defended or represented by someone who's looking at our community and not for our larger companies. So right now we're looking at a commercial volume traffic in a residential area. And I'm concerned about two main areas, which will inherently cause some consequences after that. My two areas of concern are traffic and safety. So my wife and I moved here over a year ago, and we are avid walkers, avid lovers of wildlife. And we've unfortunately had to stop our evening walks due to the traffic. When you have two 10-foot wide trucks passing each other at the same time, and then I have a culvert next to me, I don't really have a whole lot of place to go when I'm taking my evening walk. I'm not saying we should take all this down based on my evening walk, but this is a huge safety issue. In addition to this, these size trucks are extremely detrimental to our road conditions. I believe that the construction company is responsible for these, but they really like to put Band-Aids rather than really do the job correctly. So that is exactly what they have done to our road, is put a Band-Aid. And also the lack of the disregard for traffic laws. These large trucks move faster than most sports cars down our area. And we have many children and adults and elderly who like to walk down our lane. So traffic and safety are two concerns of mine, but these inherently have caused other consequences that I've noticed. These are pollution, not only noise, air, but also litter. I have seen an extreme amount increase of litter, especially around our construction area, which I cannot prove this, but if we're going to use legal jargon and try to be not as explicit as possible, then I believe that would hold up in this area. Additionally, my last point I would like to say is about the special use permit. It says that it wasn't explicit for 29 or Pritchett. Well, maybe we should make that explicit. And I also do not think that should be contingent on VDOT to use a residential road rather than a more accessible highway such as 29. If a multi-million-dollar company wants to come in, they should have to go through the legal ramifications of going through VDOT to instead of using a residential road. So I think that's kind of a cop-out. And I think it is our responsibilities as community members, everyone in this meeting, not just those who live on Pritchett Lane, to address these issues. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Kale.
Mr. Chairman, our next speaker is Nina Crawford.
Was that okay?
Yeah, it was really good.
Ms. Crawford, are you available? Ms. Crawford, you may unmute your mic and your time will begin when you begin speaking.
Thank you. My name is Nina Crawford, and I have the unfortunate displeasure of living across the street from the entrance. My life has been impacted by this, and Dave, I know you're here, and I thank you for all that you've been. You've been very helpful, but this has been quite a living nightmare for us. We too have gone to the meetings for many years, and like all my neighbors, we were told explicitly this was an emergency access. So my question to the board is, as all these meetings we went to were discussed, everyone was present, every issue was gone over, and there were public meetings. Why was there no public meeting to discuss the emergency access becoming a road? That's a question I'd like you to think about and respond to the development and the community here, that if all of the other issues that we look at have to be examined, why was this not examined and steamrolled through to the negation of the benefit and the welfare of the people on this street? As for the garbage, I will concur. There is garbage rolling into my driveway constantly. My dogs are getting sick from garbage and bones and food coming into the yard. We also have people not obeying the speed limit. The safety is an issue. The roads are an issue. I mean, I could go on for much longer than 3 minutes, but I just feel like this was such a huge oversight. My husband's family has lived on this street for many generations, and I don't believe this is what they envisioned. I think that there are ways to be more neighborly and consider the impact you're having to the people on the street. As the other neighbors have expressed, there are times where I have to wait to get out of my driveway because it's blocked by big vehicles and I can't even get out to my appointments. The traffic is also a detriment. You have to wait in line sometimes when the traffic and the trucks are coming in both directions. It is just dangerous. It is uncomfortable. As far as the buffer goes, we were told there'd be a 50-foot buffer. I know they're anticipating putting vegetation back, but why were these historic trees removed? Some of the effect from taking these historic trees down, trees have blown down in neighbors' yards that were there for years because the wind coming across the barren field across from us now is really hampering. And that's also causing the trash and the garbage and things to roll into Pritchett Lane. People walking on the street are fearing. I've seen some of the elderly people gingerly walking to the precipice, sitting by the culverts, sort of covering and cowering as these trucks roll by them. This is a dead end road. This is not 29. There's absolutely no reason why they cannot use the entrances and exits on 29 as originally planned, the 3 main routes and the spine going up through Leek Square. There is absolutely no reason not to use that and use Pritchett Lane. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Crawford.
Mr. Chairman, our next speaker and our final speaker at this point is Mr. Walt Morgan. Mr. Morgan, you can unmute your mic and your timer will begin when you begin speaking.
Hello, my name is Walt Morgan. My wife, Eva Marie Ireland, and myself have just moved in here recently, but she's been associated with this area for 10 years. We're at the end of Riverview Lane, which is the last thing you turn on basically on Pritchett Road. And my background is an engineer, and I cannot believe anyone would allow the construction traffic that's on that road. It's going to destroy that road. It's just, you don't need an engineering degree to see that. There are lots of people who walk on it that are not just kids, but elderly people, young people. It is terrifying myself when I drive on that road, what I'm going to meet head on or not. And the speed limit should probably be lowered down to 20 miles an hour, but I'm pretty sure it's going more like 45, 50 miles down that road. There has been a result of some wildlife killed because of vehicles hitting it, like a deer, stuff like that. And other concern is because this has set a precedence when the development moves down to where Riverview joins with Pritchett, are they going to do the same thing there? They're going to tear that all up and turn that into a construction zone of traffic coming in and out. And so this is not we don't like what they've done, and we don't certainly like it as a precedence. Anyway, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate your careful consideration on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan.
Mr. Chairman, right now we don't have any further names on our list, but I would like to say, I'd like to give the opportunity to those in attendance. If you would like to comment on this public hearing at this time, please signify by using your raise your hand icon. If you're calling by phone, please use the *9. Mr. Chairman, we have one raised hand. Give me just a moment.
Okay.
Mr. Morgan, you have raised your hand, but you've already spoken your 3 minutes for this public hearing.
Right. Is there another person that was wishing to speak?
It was Mr. Morgan had raised his hand once more, but he has already spoken. He was our last speaker, I believe.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry.
So I don't show any more indications of raised hands at this point.
Okay, so consistent with our rules that people get one opportunity to speak, I'm going to now close the public hearing and circle back to 5-minute summations from the staff and the appellant. And we start with the staff, Mr. Sabota. You have 5 minutes, and of course you can share that time with Mr. Herrick.
Yeah, I will share some time with Mr. Herrick. Just to cut real short to the chase is that, you know, the construction cannot happen with that specific approval, as the appellant is stating. There is only a few instances where construction access is regulated through a special use permit condition or a proffer. Otherwise, it is considered part of that development because it's only part of the temporary use, and traffic analysis do not generally incorporate the construction traffic. It is about the long-term traffic of how that development lays out. Mr. Herrick.
So along those lines, a lot of Mr. Wright's presentation was indicating that the zoning administrator approved this or the zoning administrator approved that. And I would simply point out that this really did not require an affirmative approval by the zoning administrator. The zoning administrator was not an active agent in approving this. I'm not unsympathetic with the concerns of the neighbors, but simply the zoning administrator was finding, and I agree with this finding, that there's no law against what's being done there right now. That the existing special use permit permits the use of that road as a construction entrance, and it doesn't really require an affirmative approval by the zoning administrator. That's already what the special use permit is. The special use permit does not prohibit that use of Pritchett Lane.
Okay, thank you. Bart, Mr. Herrick, Moore, you have a few moments left. Complete? Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Wright, we turn back to you. You have 5 minutes to summarize your presentation.
All right, thank you for that, Mr. Shepherd. Yeah, I mean, if the county attorney and the zoning administrator want to keep talking about the special use permit, that's fine. But I'm going to focus on the rezoning because Mr. Sabota said everything's compliant with the zoning ordinance. The rezoning is a zoning act. It's got an application plan. What does the application plan show? 2 emergency access easements. The attorney's statement that my logic doesn't allow any construction on the property is just totally bogus. They have 4 approved commercial entrances, 3 on Route 29, 1 at the end of Leak Lane. Why couldn't they use those? That's what was shown to everybody at the rezoning. That's what was approved by everybody at the rezoning. I understand why my neighbors are so hopping mad because everything said, oh, it's just an emergency access season. I was even told that by senior planning staff, you know, after it was approved. Oh, they can't do that. It's just emergency access. So again, it's what was reviewed at the rezoning. It's what was approved at the rezoning. And now it doesn't mean a thing. And it's just insane, but I'm sorry. How do you get around violating section 25A.4.1? It is a zoning violation. Until the construction entrance was approved or allowed, I guess I should say, by the zoning administrator, we didn't have a violation out here. Okay, everything was complying with the rezoning. Once he changes that and we start sending thousands and thousands of dump trucks down here, the road's falling apart. Okay, section, I don't see how the zoning administrator gets around 25A.4.1. I don't. He approved a change to a rezoning. He approved something to happen that created a zoning violation. Therefore, it cannot be in compliance with the zoning ordinance. I was in construction for years. I understand how things work. You've got to have a way to get in there and build something. And they did. They had 4 approved entrances off of public roads, not through residential areas. Okay? If they were going to absolutely have to have access to Pritchett Lane to accomplish a stream crossing, why was that not brought up at the rezoning? I mean, makes no sense. But again, something has been approved that has created a zoning violation. Therefore, it's not compliant with the zoning ordinance. I have no idea how the county attorney or the zoning administrator can spin that another way. I mean, it just makes no sense. I don't see how they do it. Again, everybody's forgotten about the rezoning. Everybody's forgotten about the application plan and what it showed. Okay, it did not show construction entrances, temporary construction easements. There was no provision made at those 2 entrance points for anything other than emergency access, which is what was approved by a legislative act. And by allowing something other than what was approved has created a zoning violation. I'm sorry, the zoning administrator does not have that kind of authority. You can't overrule a ZMA, and you certainly cannot approve something that creates a zoning violation. It doesn't work that way. So anybody has any other questions, I'm all ears. I'm here and available.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to ask everyone's indulgence and wanted to take a 2-minute break. And we will, as I say, be back here in just a couple of minutes. I don't want to take much time off, but I want to take a quick break, if that's all right. I will be back in a moment. Thank you. Looks like everyone took me up on the offer.
Mr. Shepherd, I was wondering if, this is David Mitchell. I didn't get called in the public hearing. I got moved forward. Is there a reason? Hi, Stuart. I see you. We see you.
Mr. Mitchell, I will give you the, I have a couple of questions for you that I will ask in the course of the discussion.
All right, that's fine. I just want to make sure. Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Mitchell, just for your reference, I have you on my radar. When we reconvene, I was going to remind them that you are available for any comment or to answer any questions that they had. You had not been forgotten. I just wanted to give you some peace of mind on that.
Okay, thanks.
Likewise. Is everyone back? I think we are. Let's come back to order, and we will now turn this over to discussion on the board side. I remind folks that both Mr. Mitchell is here and also Mr. Pohl is here, and both of those folks may be able to offer just understanding on background and also answer any other questions, particular questions folks have. And I also just hope we can provide some clarity. And I also want to just say I appreciate the comments that people made. I appreciate the efforts that Stuart has made on this, and hope we bring some clarity and make a good decision. So with that, public hearing is closed, and I turn it to wanting to put this to board members, starting with Mr. Reinhardt. Questions, comments? Well, or do we want to ask Mr. Mitchell to speak, or do we want to simply ask him questions? I want to just procedurally, I want to handle that in the right way. Yes, Marcia?
I would like to ask Mr. Mitchell some questions. Mr. Reinhardt, Mr. Rob.
I will yield to you. Yes.
Well, I didn't matter what, I just wanted to ask him things before, if he wants to add anything on there. I'd also like to talk to Mr. Pohl about the whole process of development. So can I start with my little story? My little story is I live across the street from a construction site, and there have been all kinds of Faulkner trucks in and out. And one of the things about the site plan itself, the approved site plan, does not show an entrance onto my little road. It shows an entrance onto Berkmar. However, they're using a construction entrance that was approved with the erosion and sediment control plan that has the entrance onto my little Woodburn Road. Okay, so it's a construction entrance. And I talked to Mr. Pohl about my construction project across the road, and he sent me a nice response. And by the way, Mr. Pohl, speedy delivery. Thank you so much. The response from you was very quick, so I appreciate that. And what he told me is, in many cases, it's a usual thing for not Bart Svoboda to approve the construction entrance, not Andy Herrick to add into any kind of input on construction entrances, but VDOT does. VDOT makes a determination with the erosion and sediment control plan of where the construction entrance has to go. Now, one of the things that happens when you get an approved rezoning, in my experience, is that you have to submit a site plan. To get a site plan approved, you have to submit an erosion and sediment control plan. The erosion and sediment control plan always has a construction entrance. The erosion and sediment control plan also has sediment basins, and it has a lot of riprap, and it has diversion dikes, and it has, I mean, I drew these up in my youth, so I know what these things are. And I also know they're temporary, that when the Board of Supervisors approves a rezoning, they're not looking at an erosion and sediment control plan. So this is something that is done for engineering purposes, and now it's become heavy duty. And we have a water protection ordinance, we have state regulations that have to be complied with. So please, the implication that Mr. Svoboda and Mr. Herrick had anything to do with approving these construction entrances, it's just not there. I mean, these things are required by law, by state law, to have an erosion and sediment control plan that is approved by the county engineer. So there's one question I would really, and I know that there's a bond on the erosion and sediment control plan, and it is temporary. And that bond gets released when, I'm assuming, and tell me if I'm wrong, when all the erosion and sediment control measures are removed. Some may remain permanent as part of the plan, but most of them, construction entrances, will be removed. Now, the question I have for Mr. Mitchell is, what's your schedule on the erosion and sediment control plan? And the other thing I want to ask Mr. Pohl and Mr. Mitchell is, once they begin construction on buildings, will they be using this construction entrance to haul lumber or concrete or block or whatever onto this site? So I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows that a lot of times this isn't something that is done by engineering or even the applicant, or certainly not zoning, to determine where the construction entrance goes. VDOT is looking at whether or not they want to have these big trucks moving out slowly on Route 29, where, I don't know, I think the speed limit is around 60 miles an hour at this point at North Point, or whether or not they want them onto a smaller road. I understand what you're talking about, because I'm dealing with the same sort of thing with big trucks moving in and out on a smaller lane. I do understand, but I also understand that there are other safety concerns that VDOT has looked at in terms of a larger segment of the population than those that are living on Pritchett. So I'm sorry I've gone so long, but if you guys could answer me on how long you think that this dirt moving is going on, how much longer you're going to be moving these trucks in there, and in terms of the bond, which I saw was over $1 million, which really surprised me, is when does this bond, when do you remove the bonding and assume that this whole erosion and sediment control plan is complete and construction can begin?
So Marcia, yeah, the bond is large because it encompasses essentially all the dirt moving and all of the temporary stormwater protection measures, and then some. I think the county usually adds a little extra for whoopsies. And that bond will stay in place in some amount. It can be reduced as we get grass to grow, as we install asphalt, as we install curb and gutter, as we install all of the things that convey water wherever the water is supposed to go. So that bond for this phase one could easily be in place for 2 or 3 years, because it sometimes on a project this large, it may take that long to establish the conditions that you're no longer causing potential erosion. So that's that. I think that's the first question. We have a stormwater management plan, a WPO plan that bond is a part of. You can amend it on site with the permission of Johnny Otto, who's our inspector. If we see something in the conditions that are different, it's as long as everybody, including the county and our engineers and the contractor, agree that it's the right thing to do. But generally speaking, we follow the plan. Like the plan is like a battle plan, first contact and you change it, but we try to stick to it as close as possible, and we have. And then let's see, the entrance is only for the construction of the dirt moving in phase one. And phase one in our parlance is everything to the east of Flat Branch, which is the main stream that runs through the middle of this project. Part of the reason that this may not have been thought about 20 years ago when this plan was originally put forward, was at the time, the Corps of Engineers was going to allow us to pipe all of the streams on that property, including Flat Branch, and build a big pond to be a regional stormwater facility. In the intervening 20 years, that is no longer an option. The Corps of Engineers does not allow the wholesale piping of streams anymore, or the impoundment of streams to create that lake that was part of the southern commercial entrance. And therefore, we lost access to cross the creek in a substantial way. We still have the single box culvert entrance that's been talked about that comes from 29 into the middle entrance. There's a 2 8-foot by 10-foot box culverts and about 40 foot of fill to get across that ravine. But the problem we have there is the dirt to fill that ravine comes from the phase 1 side of the stream, which is on the Pritchard side of the project.
Oh.
So we did get the contractor, Faulkner Construction, which is a great contractor and does a wonderful job. They're not the least expensive, but they're the best. They got a land use permit from VDOT. They have permission from VDOT to enter at that point, and presumably VDOT has assessed that that's an acceptable location. I'm sure this is true. I'm sure that VDOT will, when that entrance is closed, VDOT will assess it and have Faulkner repair any damages that they deem necessary to be repaired. That's usually how land use permits work, the ones that we've dealt with. This permit happens to be in the name of Faulkner Construction, not the developer. That's just the process we went through. It doesn't really affect the function of anything. It's just a sidebar to it. The houses and the trusses and all that stuff are not going to come through there. We are within weeks of closing in on completing the gravel and a portion of the asphalt so we can actually drive across those box culverts I talked about. It has taken longer than I wanted it to, but as soon as we gain access across those box culverts, we do not need that construction access any longer. It was simply because it was the only point of access that we reasonably had. I've heard a lot I understand how these things go, but I've got to push back a little bit. I know people get angry and upset. We're not a big corp. We are a family-owned development company that's been here for 40 years. And we do the best we can to work within this community because we've got to live here too. I know people hear that all the time and it sounds like something people just throw out, but it's true. Now, the letter that was spoken about, I'm sorry, Mr. Stewart decided to walk out the room. The letter that he's talked about was specific to a permanent access not being on Pritchard. That has always been the case. And if it was misunderstood, I'm sorry that was misunderstood by people, but that's the way that letter was presented. That's the way I read that letter. And I think that that's the right way to interpret it. Another sidebar, Nina Crawford and a guy named Alex, who wouldn't give me his last name, were the only two neighbors that contacted me directly. And there've been a lot of complaints, and Miss Ragsdale, I always told her, I said, give them my name and number and I'll be happy to meet with them and talk to them. And Nina's been great. I understand she's upset and she's clearly the most impacted person because she's directly across the street from this access point. And I understand she's not happy, but I would hope that she believes me when and can attest to the fact that I've returned her calls and gone to see her multiple times to try to fix whatever mistakes that are happening. I mean, you've got truck drivers all truck drivers drive too fast occasionally. They are large pieces of equipment. These things are going to happen. I mean, when humans are involved, nothing is perfect. But I have tried every time she has called me to address it and fix it. And I think that I have. And the one guy, Mr. Alex, again, I don't know his last name, I did the same thing. I mean, I read the riot act to the superintendent and the truck drivers about driving slow and being respectful of the people that live in this neighborhood. And we have tried to correct every issue that's been brought forward. But literally, the only two people that have contacted me directly were Alex and Nina. And I think we could have gotten along. We maybe could have avoided this if I had been contacted directly. I had offered that. I know my information was given to everybody and nobody called me. And regarding the buffer, the trees that were taken down were because that was an area that needed to be graded in order to build the lots. It's a 30-foot buffer. It is being designed. It will be installed in the spring of next year, 2021. And it has been reviewed and is pending approval from the planning staff. It is and there are specific requirements for that buffer, and it will be installed and maintained per the proffers.
Okay, so what I heard from you about scheduling is you're expecting that this entrance will be closed within the next few weeks. Is that what I heard?
Yes.
Okay, so
we will put boulders and trees across the entrance.
okay, and so the other thing I heard is that you're using this entrance because you had to put a box culvert in on, and you needed the dirt to fill in that area. Is that?
Yeah, that's the way the site lays out. There, all of the fill dirt for this project is on the east side of Flat Branch, and therefore you need to get access to that side to start filling across that area. That's where the equipment is that's moving all the dirt. I mean, you know, and on an average day, you're talking 15 to 20 guys driving to work. There are days when we would deliver, you know, gravel or dirt to the site or large pipes and structures. And clearly that is a lot of traffic in a short period of time. But I think it is incorrect to say that it is that traffic consistently every day, 8 hours a day. That's just not the case. But there is heavy traffic in short periods of time. Absolutely.
Mr. Pohl, do you have anything you'd like to add from anything that your inspectors have seen out there?
With regards to the entrance, no, I don't have anything to say about that. We do approve plans, but rely on VDOT for determining and issuing permits for those entrances. So we do have entrances that move. They're shown on the plan, but when they get into the construction phase and they ask for an entrance permit, VDOT does sometimes, rarely, but they may decide that a different location is more suitable. And then they make that determination and work with the contractor to put those in a suitable location. With regards to the bond, I can see the bond being, as Mr. Mitchell said, 2 or 3 years out. There's stormwater components that are also have to be constructed that typically aren't completed until after the site is stabilized. So that could take a little bit longer. And part of the release, though, is to close up those construction entrances, remove them, and all of the E&S measures.
Okay. Thank you. I'm done, John.
Okay. Thank you, Marcia. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Thank you, Mr. Pohl, for that. That was a good discussion, and I appreciate it. Mr. Robb, any further comments, questions, ideas?
Well, I'm grateful for the time and energy that Mr. Mitchell has provided. I think it's important to have people from both sides of the conflict or disagreement or whatever. I'm sorry that the community hasn't been able to get that sort of treatment, I guess. And I think, it's a human frailty where the squeaky wheels get the grease. And I'm really glad to hear that that the temporary entrances will be closed up in a short period of time. That's real reassuring. And I quite can't understand it, and I really think there is a problem with this picture. Why they even use the term emergency entrance? Why not just say access? Why call it and I don't know, maybe somebody can answer that. Emergency to me is a whole lot different from access. And then VDOT had to have issued a permit. I presume, maybe I'm wrong. I've never known of any times when VDOT didn't inspect and issue entrance permits. Is there a entrance permit? Maybe Mr. Mitchell can answer that one.
Yes, we have a land use permit from VDOT with Faulkner Construction for that location.
Would that be an entrance permit?
Yeah, VDOT calls it a land use permit. Yes.
Because I know from my experience being around the construction business somewhat, in order to put a driveway into somebody's property, you had to get an entrance permit.
Right. That's for a permanent access point. But when you're doing temporary access or construction, or if you're going to leave a improvement like a tree in the VDOT right of way in an island or something like that, VDOT just says, this is our land, this is our right of way. You have to get a land use permit for that.
Well, thanks for that understanding. But the idea too that I think was provided that we could try to compare Route 29 and Pritchett Lane is ridiculous. And that comparison was made today. There's no comparison as far as traffic control on Route 29. That can be accomplished by using the control systems that we have, including police. And so I don't know, but I do understand where Mr. Mitchell's coming from and the fact that they needed to get equipment in there to move the dirt. But once my question is, once that equipment is in there, how come there's that many trips up and down that road? But did they have to haul the dirt all the way around? Is that it? Or what happened there? That doesn't make any sense.
Do you want me to answer that?
Yes.
So during the construction of the main fill area and the box culverts, there are also a bunch of underground piping structures that are part of the E&S plan and the stormwater management plan that are all have to be installed at the same time that you are excavating the dirt, because you've got to control permanently and temporarily the runoff of the excavation area as you're moving that dirt down into the creek, into the over top of the box culverts. So that equipment that's being, and that's not just moving dirt. You're bringing in gravel, you're bringing in select fill. Sometimes we can't find the right type of dirt, specifically clays that are required in the dams. So sometimes you need to bring in materials that are not available on site. And that's all of those structures and facilities that need to be built in order to facilitate you to do the land clearing and the dirt moving without dumping all of the sediment into the streams, require other materials that have to be brought on. That's what that equipment, that's what that traffic is that you see. That's not just the guys, driving to work in the morning, parking, and then getting on their equipment and driving around all day. There are times when you have to bring in materials and parts and pieces and structures to facilitate the excavation of that dirt to fill that creek. Or not the creek, but over top of the box culvert.
Mr. Mitchell, were you available at the time when this project was going through the approval process some many years ago? Were you involved?
I was living in Richmond and single.
So you don't know what Mr. Wright and the others were told by the people?
I saw the letter. That's the only thing from the rezoning that I would know. And obviously I have the documents from the rezoning, the proffers that are, and the SUP that's currently specified. But my involvement with this project started probably 4 years ago when we started to actually do the design of the subdivision and the structures, not the rezoning, but the actual construction plans for the project.
Yeah, my position is that I think somebody used the word neighborly. It just seems to me, and I'm one of those people who would like to be a peacemaker if I can be. Maybe that's from being a politician. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it seems to me like the neighbors could have been somehow appeased and brought into the whole picture much sooner than what, and I know you say you tried to do that with a couple of people, but I'm sorry that it's gotten to this point, and I don't know what we can do about it at this point, at this time, but try to bring it together, because
Best thing I can do is get off the road and get out of there, which is what we're trying to do as fast as possible.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think I don't know how everybody else feels about it, but I really sympathize with the neighbors out there. But I realize the position that Mr. Svoboda is in too, and everybody, all of us are sympathetic, I think. Let's try to do the best we can, and I'll stop my preaching, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Robb. Good points. Mr. Reinhardt?
Mr. Chairman, I have no further comments. I'm in a position to make a motion, and maybe that's not appropriate because I need to hear from my other board members.
Well, I'd like to offer couple of thoughts. One, I think the issues have been set forth very well. I will tell you, my first reaction to this was being mindful of both the importance of just reading the words on the page of the final, the action letter for the rezoning and the special use permit, and know that that was the starting point. And I did go from there to wondering, about the points that Mr. Wright is making about, the words on the page, emergency access easement, as opposed to a construction entrance. And I was wondering about that, and I realized that there have been many public hearings and discussions about this. I did read the minutes from the final board meeting, and you could just tell from what the Board of Supervisors were saying that they were very aware of all of the issues, and had thought about it enough to where they were, the minutes from the final meeting reflected a sort of a summations from the board members. Many of these things were not discussed at that point, but clearly they had been in the past. So my point with that, so I was looking for that in the looking for more guidance on how the terms emergency access easement was used versus the construction entrance. And I'm also and I've come to the conclusion, I'm making an assumption that the board knew that there were great concerns from the people on Pritchett Lane, but were viewing their approval as what was required for the final project, the final built out project. And we're not focused on the construction entrance. And in fact, and so with that, and I haven't seen anything to dissuade me from that. And I've come to learn that the approval of construction entrances is more in the bailiwick of VDOT rather than that comes after the approval of the project rather than the Board of Supervisors, or, to make final decisions about construction entrances, unless there was some particular thing that would explicitly be put forth as a condition. So those are the things I'm thinking. Those are all going into my decision. I'm also want to just appreciate what Mr. Robb was saying, and others have also said. I hope that the project, just as time goes by, I hope that the folks on Pritchett Lane and the developers here can work together as best they can so that impacts to the Pritchett Lane are minimized, and there's a good communication there. And I know that in the short term, it's a very difficult and negative thing that's happening out there. It's what I'm thinking. Mr. Carrington, do you have a take on this?
I do, Mr. Chairman. I'll be quick. I think I'll echo some of the comments that have been made, but in general, I guess I agree with some of the sentiments that while it might be unfortunate and nobody likes litter and noise and big trucks near their house, that this is not the appropriate venue to seek relief from that, and that feels like something that fell through the cracks in the rezoning process, and also that it's more in the purview of VDOT than the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Okay, thank you. Other comments from anyone on the board?
Mr. Chairman, I will go ahead and pipe in. First, I am extremely sensitive and sympathetic to the neighbors on Pritchett Lane, without question. I can't imagine what they have endured to this point. Based on the facts of the testimony that I've heard today, I would like to make the following motion. I would move that the Board of Zoning Appeals affirm the zoning administrator's determination of the violation found on attachment C. So bottom line is I'd like to affirm the zoning administrator's determination.
I'll second it.
Okay, further discussion? Ms. Ellie, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Reinhardt,
Aye.
Ms. Joseph,
I thought one of the things we were going to do is repeat the motion before we voted on it. Can we do that?
Yes, thank you.
And I think one of the things, Mr. Reinhardt, that was missed in there was affirm the zoning administrators determine of no violation found on attachment C. So I just wanted to add the no, okay?
Were you an English teacher?
No,
I just realized that I did miss a key word there. I apologize to my fellow board members.
okay.
I will repeat the motion. Sorry. I move that the Board of Zoning Appeals affirm the zoning administrator's determination of no violation found. Thank you for that correction.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second it.
Thank you, Mr. Robb. Okay. Further discussion? Mrs. Alley, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Reinhardt,
Aye.
Ms. Joseph,
Aye.
Mr. Robb,
Aye.
Mr. Carrington,
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd,
Aye. That's final. I look forward to the quick completion of this phase of the project. Mr. Bowling, are you, you're on mute, but it looks like, I think you're saying something.
I apologize. I'm telling my paralegal goodnight.
Oh, okay. Well, okay, so with that, as I say, I look forward to a quick conclusion to this phase of the project and get the big trucks off of Pritchett Lane. I regret, well, I just hope that hope this can settle things for the moment, and appreciate everybody's diligence with this hearing. Thank you, particularly the staff for the work they did on this. Mr. Pohl, for spending the best part of your day here. For not many minutes on the job, but it was helpful, and I appreciate your helping us out here. And with that, okay, so that item is concluded. We move on to, I think we're to the, guess we're now moving on to approval of the minutes.
I move approval for the minutes of November 10th, 2020.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? None from me. Ms. Alley, could you call the roll?
Mr. Reinhardt,
Aye.
Ms. Joseph,
Aye.
Mr. Robb,
Aye.
Mr. Carrington,
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd,
Aye. So the minutes are approved from November. Turn now to old business. Mr. Savoda, old business to bring back and discuss.
I have none. We have an update for you. I think you asked for last time on Mr. Moss, and his home occupation has been approved and the letter sent out.
Good. Does that mean the appeals have been withdrawn, or are they going to move forward?
No, the appeals are not moving forward. I've not yet filed the paperwork, but have started preparing the paperwork to file what's called a voluntary non-suit, which would be the voluntary withdrawal of the county's appeals.
Okay, thank you. Well, that was the long way to a good conclusion, but I'm glad to hear that. Anything else from other members?
I'm sorry, I muted myself when I was getting ready to talk. Sorry. Andy, I just want to again, and I think I sent you an email. If I didn't, I apologize, but I just wanted to echo what some of my fellow board members have said about the 2 months of your sincere education, that I learned a lot. I realized that the few times that I have withdrawn from hearing a case, I could have actually heard it and not had a conflict, which I I got an education from that perspective. If I could move back to just kind of a question, and I don't, Marcia, I don't mean to have this come out this way, but do we have the right, if I'm referring to the variance earlier, we are more concerned about the face of the building and its setback than its design or what it looks like. And am I missing something? Because Marcia talked more about making sure the design, and that's not our job. It could have.
According to what I was reading, we can do that.
Okay.
As part of the variance approval, according to what you guys sent me, that is something that we can consider in a variance. So that's why I thought, because it's going to be so close to the road, it should be something that we look at the design itself. Am I wrong on that?
My limited time here, I've never talked about, if you will, architectural review of a structure. It's simply the face of the building, and I will be quiet.
No, I'm not insulted. I just thought that that's what I had read. And since nobody jumped on it, I thought, okay, I'm good here. I can do this.
So a similar question arose in my mind when there was a proposal to impose conditions. What triggers the need for a variance is or was the setbacks, but it specifically provides in Virginia Code 15.2-2309, the variance section, it provides, in granting a variance, the board may impose such conditions regarding the location, character, and other features of the proposed structure or use as it may deem necessary in the public interest. So conditions are allowable, but again, what triggers the need for it in the first place is the setback.
What that really means is that kind of broad sweeping language, you may have a temptation to go crazy, but you should be circumspect.
Yeah, and we trust you won't.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. The concern now, turning to the applicant, is the reason why I asked that question was, did they actually have that foundation spotted by a surveyor, and thinking about any projections that may cause them to go inside of that we granted, and apparently they have already thought of that. But I always want to caution when you're looking at a variance, especially that much of a variance, that is so noted. That's not our job. I just wanted to think outside the box for them. But go ahead.
When the house construction began, which is subject to a different section of the ordinance, so it did not need a variance. There's a physical survey that was done of the property that identified some of those locations to be able to pinpoint that more accurately than what would have been like a tax map with an overlay.
Well, just like Rob went down that road, and John went, that addition that they're putting on the back of that house is way beyond down into this creek bed, or I mean, not the creek bed, but that's a substantial addition that they are putting on. That's amazing. But that wasn't what we were hearing. It's just a comment that I'm making.
No, I agree, because it's shown right within the 100-foot buffer, but apparently it's okay.
Okay. Okay.
I heard some of the members say that they were unfamiliar with the James River Association.
That was me, yeah.
That organization that did yeoman's work in getting the James River from the beginning up to down at the bay declared a scenic river, which is a big victory. It's an important designation. And they do major work on the James River. And they locally, if you go to the Chesapeake Bay Foundation's website, they have done it's not a video, it's one of these realtor tours when you're in a kayak going down the James, and they have an interesting tour from the bridge at Scottsville down to where the Hardware River comes in, if you want to take a look at it.
Thank you.
Interesting.
I've floated that area, and it is one beautiful part of the James River. Bart, do we have a Monday, sorry, a January meeting? I can't remember.
Typically, January is our organizational meeting,
Okay.
but I believe, and Marcia can jump in here, it may be actually not the first Monday. I gotta pull up my calendar.
It is January 5th.
Okay, so yeah, is the first Monday, but not. I was thinking Monday was the first was a Monday for some reason.
The first Tuesday, January 5th.
No, sorry, first Tuesday.
So I want to take a moment to wish each and every one of you all a wonderful holiday season. Marcia, I taking care of us the way you have this past year, kudos. We used to give a gift. We weren't allowed to give a gift later on, but play like you've got a little gift in the air, because I'm sure I'm speaking for the rest of the board. We are so indebted to you for keeping us straight. And then I want to express my appreciation, obviously, to Andy, Francis, and Bart for your support. And that was a compliment coming from the appellant. I mean, sorry, from the variants, the couple, when they said about how professional our county is, and that goes kudos. So thank you for all of that. And I know most of us, or maybe I'm speaking for everybody, I think we're all looking forward to 21, and let's move on to 21, and it's got to be hopefully better.
Thank you. Here to that. So
Thank you, and happy holidays to all of you as well.
You.
I appreciate working with all of you, and look forward to more ventures in the future. I think things get better and better as we go along.
Thank y'all. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I know this is not easy work sometimes, and so I appreciate your dedication and volunteering. Thank you.
We never hear about the easy ones. You take care of that.
I keep the easy ones to myself.
Often by the time we get them, things are kind of tough.
Yeah.
So I move for adjournment.
Is there a second?
Second.
Let's vote on that by signifying a grand yes. Yes.
Yes.
Happy holidays.
Thank
Salute.
you so much. Best wishes for the good holidays, and see you in January.
Wear those masks.
Oh, yes.
Social distancing. Guys need to hear more.
Because we all want to see each other again.